I got home just after sunset, still in my navy jacket because it was easier than changing in a gas station bathroom somewhere between the base and Oregon. My parents' house looked the same as it always did during the holidays, too many lights on the porch, a wreath big enough to qualify as a safety hazard, and my dad's truck parked crooked like parallel parking was optional. The moment I opened the front door, warmth hit my face, followed immediately by my sister's voice. "Oh look," Vanessa said, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Our lonely Navy girl finally made it. She didn't even glance up from her wine glass. She just smirked like she had been saving that line for weeks. My mom laughed the way moms do when they want to smooth things over, and my dad gave me a half nod before disappearing into the kitchen like he had a flight to catch. I put my bag down and told myself not to react. I've spent years in the Navy. I can survive a holiday with my family. Still, the way Vanessa dragged out the words, lonely, and Navy girl, had a familiar sting. She said it like being single in uniform was some kind of personal failing. Only Vanessa could weaponize my job and my relationship status in one breath. She walked over and kissed my cheek like she hadn't just taken a swing at me. "Traffic bad?" "Pretty normal," I said. "Nothing crazy." "Right. Because you never have anything crazy going on," she replied with this sugary tone that made my teeth hurt. Mom stepped in. "Girls, it's Christmas. Be nice." Vanessa put a hand on her chest. "I am being nice. I'm just saying Aubrey works too much to have any kind of life outside the Navy. It's not my fault the dating pool shrinks when you're never home." She looked around like she was waiting for applause. I hung my jacket on the hook and told myself to let it go. She always did this, took little digs wrapped in concern. I'd learned to take it like a flu shot. Annoying, painful, but temporary. But the truth stung anyway. When you spend years deploying, moving, training, uprooting your entire life every 12 months, relationships don't exactly thrive. And Vanessa knew that. She loved using it as a punchline. My mom poured me a glass of water. Not wine water. That tells you everything about the family dynamic. "Dinner's almost ready," she said. "We waited for you." "Did she?" Vanessa asked, eyebrows up. "Or did we just run out of things to talk about?" I ignored her and headed to the dining room. The table looked nice. To be fair, my mom always overdid holidays. And honestly, I appreciated it. Gold napkins, matching plates, candles that smelled like pine trees, she went all in. I sat down and tried to blend into the furniture. Vanessa sat across from me, legs crossed, hair curled, makeup perfect. She looked like she had stepped out of a magazine labeled, "People Who Think They're Better Than You." She kept glancing at her phone, smiling at messages like someone was writing love letters to her ego. She saw me looking. "It's my boss," she said, casually dropping the word like a grenade. "He wants me on a new project next quarter. Big opportunity." I nodded. "Good for you." She smirked. "Yeah, he really appreciates people who have, stability." That word again. Always stability. Like being in the Navy, made me some kind of drifter with commitment issues. The food came out turkey, mashed potatoes, stuffing, the whole predictable spread, and I was halfway through a bite when Vanessa leaned back in her chair, lifted her glass, and said, "Mom, I just don't want Aubrey to end up alone. No one wants to date Navy girls, they're never around. They're basically married to their job." Her voice carried across the table. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. Dad looked at his plate. Mom sighed. Vanessa kept smiling, like she had just delivered breaking news. And maybe I should have snapped back. Maybe I should have reminded her that my job protects people like her, who think Wi-Fi passwords are advanced cybersecurity, but I didn't. I just put my fork down and looked at her. She waited for a reaction, and when I didn't give her one, that annoyed her even more. She wanted drama. She wanted victory. She wanted to humiliate me in the one place she always felt superior. Instead, I just leveled my voice and said, "Thanks for your concern." She blinked. Twice, confused that I didn't crumble. That was the moment right there, when the first crack formed in the image she built of me. She just didn't know it yet. My mom served more food, acting like she could shovel mashed potatoes over tension, and Vanessa launched into a story about her boss again, this time with extra sparkle in her eyes. She talked about him like he was the prize at the end of a scavenger hunt only she deserved. But I listened quietly, because for the first time in years, the thing she bragged about didn't get under my skin. Not after the last 6 months. Not after the very specific message waiting on my phone. Not after everything she didn't know. And definitely not after the way the night would unfold. I pushed my chair back and carried my plate to the kitchen, hoping a few minutes away from the table would cool the heat in my chest. The house smelled like cinnamon and roasted turkey, but underneath it, I could still feel Vanessa's words clinging to me like smoke. I rinsed the dish, set it on the counter, and steadied my breath. Years in the Navy taught me how to shut down noise, but family noise, that's a different kind of battlefield. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A quick glance told me it was an update from the base about next week's schedule, another cybersecurity briefing, another set of threat reports. Nothing dramatic, just routine. I tucked the phone away, but my mind drifted automatically back to work, the one place where people didn't treat me like I was fragile or lacking something. I leaned against the counter for a moment and remembered the last major cyber incident I handled. Nothing classified, nothing movie-worthy. Just a contractor's device infected with malware that could have jumped to a Navy network if no one caught it. My team spent 14 hours isolating the threat, patching vulnerabilities, and documenting the chain of events. It wasn't glamorous, but it mattered. And it kept real people safe. Yet to my family, I was still the lonely Navy girl. Mom walked in to put away a tray of rolls. "She doesn't mean anything by it," she said softly, like she was offering a peace treaty. "I know," I said, even though I didn't. "She just thinks you work too hard." I nodded without answering. Hard work was never the issue. The issue was that Vanessa assumed my life was empty because it didn't look like hers. I grabbed a glass of water and returned to the living room. Vanessa was on the couch now, curled up with a blanket, phone in hand, swiping with the subtlety of a lighthouse beacon. She glanced over. "So, how long are you home this time? 2 days? 3? A week," I said. She raised an eyebrow like that was excessive. "A whole week off? Must be nice." I let that one pass too. Explaining military leave to Vanessa was like explaining Wi-Fi to a potato. She chose not to understand. Dad muted the TV and asked, "Everything going okay at work?" "Pretty steady. Cyber stuff's always busy." Vanessa snorted. "Yeah, must be wild clicking keyboards all day." Asked her way. My jaw tightened for half a second, but I didn't give her more than that. I'd been on deployments where we slept 4 hours a night, ate whatever the galley shoved at us, and worked during storms that made the entire ship groan. But sure, clicking keyboards. Mom sat next to me. "Do you ever meet people in the Navy? You know, someone nice?" The question hung in the air like a damp towel. I answered honestly. "It's complicated." Vanessa cut in before anyone else could speak. Meaning, no. I stared at the TV, pretending the commercials were fascinating. What I didn't say was that dating in the military is like trying to build a house on shifting sand. Just when you get the foundation steady, orders change or deployments hit. I'd tried before. It ended the same way every time. One guy told me he couldn't compete with the uniform. Another said long distance wasn't his thing. The last one broke up through a 3-sentence text, while my ship was somewhere between Guam and Hawaii. I didn't blame them. It's a hard life if you're not built for it. But Vanessa, repeating the pattern like it was a personality flaw, that was another level. She turned her attention back to her phone, lips curling into a smirk. "My boss just emailed again. He wants me on a new investment track next quarter. He says I have leadership potential." Mom beamed. Dad nodded. Vanessa waited for me to respond, but I held my expression neutral. "That's great," I said smoothly. She pushed further. "He's very selective about who he elevates. You'd love him actually. Very successful. Very stable." There it was again. Stable, her favorite code word for better than you. I stretched my legs out and crossed my arms, letting my eyes wander across the room. Christmas decorations, family photos, and an old wooden cabinet that refused to close properly. This house wasn't perfect, but it was familiar. And the familiarity made Vanessa's digs sting less than they used to. Mom stood up. "Aubrey, can you help me bring in the pie?" "Sure." In the kitchen, she handed me the dish and said quietly, "You know we're proud of you, right?" I smiled because she needed that answer, not because I fully believed it. Thanks, Mom. We walked back toward the living room, just as Vanessa launched into a new story about her CEO, how he complimented her presentation, how he trusted her judgment, how he saw her potential. She said his name like it tasted sweet. He's just so put together, she said dreamily. Smart, composed, mature. My type. I sat down and let her keep going. Every sentence layered another brick into the tower she was building in her head, a tower that would lose its foundations soon enough. She looked at me suddenly. Do you even know anyone like that? I feel like the Navy keeps you trapped in high school relationships. I took a sip of water to keep from laughing. If she knew even a fraction of the people I worked with, pilots, officers, analysts, tech minds, sharper than steel, she'd swallow her words whole. But I didn't give her the satisfaction of a reaction. I let her keep talking, because sometimes silence reveals more than arguing ever could. And as she talked, my phone buzzed again in my pocket. A short message lit up the screen. Just a few words, simple and direct, from a man she admired far more than she realized. I locked the screen before she could see the glow. The room hummed with Vanessa's voice, but my mind had already shifted to the next step of the night. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and let Vanessa's voice fade into background noise, the same way I used to tune out the hum of servers during long overnight shifts. That tiny vibration from earlier tugged at a memory I hadn't expected to think about tonight, the first time I met Graham Wilder. It was 6 months ago, at a veterans charity event in Seattle. I'd shown up in uniform, mostly because the Navy sent me as the cyber representative for the panel discussion. Nothing dramatic. Just another day of explaining digital security to civilians who thought strong password meant adding an exclamation point. I remember standing near the back of the ballroom, holding a cup of lukewarm coffee, trying not to look like the loner officer at a corporate mixer. Then someone tapped my shoulder. Lieutenant Cole? I turned and found a man in a tailored gray suit, no tie, sleeves rolled back just enough to seem human. He had that calm, steady presence you could feel before he even spoke. His eyes were sharp but tired in a way that suggested he'd carried real loss, not just workplace stress. I'm Graham Wilder, he said. I wanted to thank you for your remarks during the panel. I almost choked on the coffee. Not because I knew who he was, I didn't at the time, but because no CEO ever approaches the military rep unless something has gone wrong. I straightened automatically. Of course, I said. Glad it was useful. It was more than useful, he replied. It was the first time someone explained cybersecurity without making it sound like a foreign language. My staff was taking notes like their lives depended on it. To action. His voice was warm but not overly charming, like he didn't need to perform for anyone. That was the thing I noticed first. He talked to me like my job mattered, not like I was a backdrop for a networking event. He asked if I'd be open to speaking with his corporate tech team someday. Nothing binding, nothing urgent, just curiosity. I told him yes, because it felt harmless, because he looked genuinely interested, because he wasn't trying to impress me. Then I shook his hand and walked away, thinking I'd never see him again. But 2 weeks later, his office emailed the Navy, requesting a consultation for a security review. And the point of contact assigned to work with me? Graham himself. Back in my parents' living room, Vanessa's laugh snapped me out of the memory. She was on her third glass of wine now, legs tucked under her like she owned the couch, giggling at whatever message her boss had just sent. She kept turning her phone, so the screen faced her chest, which was hilarious because no one cared except her. I reached for my water again, and she glanced at me. So, Aubrey, she said, stretching the words. Ever met anyone exciting at work? Maybe a cute officer? A pilot? Someone who doesn't move every 5 minutes? I considered telling her the truth for fun, just to watch her choke on her Pinot Grigio. But that would have ended the night too quickly. Not really, I said. She smirked. Yeah, didn't think so. Mom returned from the kitchen with a plate of cookies, and everyone reached for one except Vanessa, who looked too busy mentally marrying her CEO to bother with sugar. I leaned back on the sofa, letting another memory slip through. The first time Graham and I spent more than 20 minutes talking was during a video call with his CIO. Their company had flagged some suspicious outbound traffic, nothing catastrophic, but enough to worry him. I walked them through the risk assessment process, asked a bunch of questions, and explained the difference between real threats and the annoying noise that just clogs logs. When the CIO logged off, Graham stayed. "Lieutenant," he said, "would it be inappropriate to ask how long you've been doing this?" "Almost a decade," I told him. He nodded slowly, like that number meant something deeper to him. "It takes discipline to stay in one field that long." I shrugged. "The Navy doesn't exactly encourage job hopping." He smiled, not flirty, just impressed. "Still, discipline isn't common." That moment lodged itself in my brain for reasons I didn't fully understand at the time. Not because he complimented me, but because he meant it without expectation. Back in the living room, the fireplace crackled, and Dad tried switching the TV to a football game. Vanessa snatched the remote before he could get comfortable. "I'm waiting for an email," she said. "Important." Dad sighed the way fathers do when they want peace but know they aren't getting it. I checked my phone again, mostly to avoid rolling my eyes at her. Another message from Graham flashed on the screen. Short, direct, his style. "Hope your drive went smoothly. Let me know if tomorrow still works." Tomorrow. Vanessa's Christmas gala. Her big night to impress him. Her moment to shine. I typed a quick reply, confirming the timing, and locked my phone before she could notice. She looked up anyway, suspicious. "Who's that?" "Work," I said plainly. She scoffed. "Right. Cyber emergencies at dinner time. Classic." I didn't bother correcting her. She had spent years assuming my life was empty because it didn't orbit around her definition of success. She had no idea that her own boss valued my expertise more than she ever would. And she definitely didn't know that the man she admired spent 6 months quietly trusting my judgment. She stretched out her legs again. "Well, tomorrow's going to be a huge day for me. My boss sees real potential in me. We have great chemistry. Professional chemistry, obviously." I kept my expression neutral, but a faint smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. Not enough for her to catch it, but enough for me to feel grounded. She had no clue how close our worlds had already collided. She had no clue that tomorrow would look nothing like she imagined. And she had absolutely no clue who her boss had been messaging all evening. I set my phone face down on the arm of the couch and let Vanessa talk herself in circles about her professional chemistry with a man who had never once looked at her the way she imagined. The way she curled her hair behind her ear every time she mentioned him would have been funny if the whole situation weren't so painfully predictable. She always wanted what she couldn't have, and she always assumed she deserved it more than anyone else. I shifted slightly, sinking deeper into the couch cushion, and my thoughts drifted back to the months I spent working with Graham quietly, efficiently, without any dramatic sparks or movie-style music swelling in the background. The first security review we did together wasn't glamorous. It was a 3-hour call where his tech team tried to pretend their system wasn't a mess, while Graham sat off to the side listening like every detail mattered. He didn't interrupt. He didn't pretend he understood things he didn't. He asked smart questions, the kind that showed he wasn't trying to impress anyone. I walked them through updating their firewall rules, reinforcing endpoint protection, and because every corporate office loves shortcuts, removing admin privileges from people who never should have had them. Graham took notes himself. CEOs don't take notes unless they actually care. After the call, he emailed me directly. "Thank you for the clarity. It helps more than you know. No emojis, no fluff, just respect." Over the next few months, our conversations stayed strictly professional. We reviewed incident logs, planned a series of audits, and built a better response playbook for his team. Every call followed the same pattern. The CIO talked for too long, the tech leads panicked about budget, and Graham listened. But when everyone else left the call, he'd stay behind a minute or two, not flirting, not pushing, just talking like a human being who appreciated another human being. He once said, "I'm not used to being the least knowledgeable person in the room. It's strangely refreshing." I laughed. "Try being a woman in uniform. It's basically my daily workout." He smiled a little, and it wasn't the kind of smile meant to make someone blush. It was the kind that said he understood more than he let on. Some days he'd ask about my deployment experience. Not the dramatic stuff, just the logistics, the long hours, the teamwork. He wanted to understand the structure and discipline behind it all. He said it reminded him of his wife, who'd passed away 4 years earlier, steady, organized, unshakable. He talked about her gently, without letting grief turn the room dark. I never asked questions he didn't offer answers to. Respecting boundaries was the one constant in both of our worlds. Back in my parents' living room, Vanessa tossed her blanket aside and switched into storytelling mode. So today, my boss told me my presentation was very polished, she said, complete with dramatic hand gestures. He said I was someone he notices. I mean, he didn't use those exact words, but I could tell. I nodded politely, even though I'd heard Graham compliment dozens of employees exactly like that. He gave encouragement freely. It didn't mean he was mentally shopping for engagement rings. She kept going. He doesn't talk to everyone the way he talks to me. There's just something there. I could have told her that I had heard him talk that way to half the finance team, the interns, and a random guy fixing the projector during one of our meetings, but I didn't. Letting Vanessa live in her own fiction for another night felt kinder than the truth. I stretched my legs, and my mind returned to a certain late afternoon call 2 months into our work together. We had just wrapped up a review of fishing trends when Graham lingered again. "Lieutenant," he said, "can I ask something without it sounding intrusive?" I said sure, expecting a follow-up on the audit. "How do you stay so calm when you're talking through worst-case scenarios?" I shrugged. "Someone has to." He nodded slowly. "That's rare. People panic fast. You don't." I didn't think much of it then. Compliments about composure come with the territory. But that moment stuck with me, because he wasn't admiring me, he was studying the way I solved problems. I appreciated that more than any flattery. Vanessa circled back to the conversation with a new burst of enthusiasm. "I think he's going to choose me for a senior role next year. You should have seen how he looked at me this week." I took a sip of water to keep my expression neutral. He looked at me like he saw potential. I raised an eyebrow. "Did he say that?" "Well, not directly," she admitted. "But I could tell." Her certainty was almost impressive. Dad tried turning the TV back on, but Vanessa yanked the remote again. "Dad, seriously, I'm waiting on an email." "It's Christmas," he grumbled. She rolled her eyes. "Exactly. I'm busy." I leaned forward slightly, elbows on my knees. Vanessa didn't realize that her boss had already sent 3 emails tonight, none of them to her. She didn't realize that half the consulting work I'd done for him affected projects she bragged about leading. She didn't realize that her world and mine had overlapped long before she decided to make my life her seasonal entertainment. And she definitely didn't realize that the reason Graham respected me had nothing to do with charm or office politics. He respected competence. He respected honesty. He respected people who spoke plainly and meant what they said. Vanessa liked the idea of Graham. Graham liked the reality of me. Only one of those things existed outside her imagination. The fireplace popped loudly, and the sound pulled Vanessa out of her daydream long enough for her to glance at my phone again. "Are you sure that's just work?" she asked, suspicious. I nodded. "Steady." "Pretty sure." She huffed and curled back into her blanket like the world owed her a love story, simply because she wanted one. I didn't dwell on it. My phone buzzed again, this time a short notification confirming tomorrow's arrival time for the event. Not for Vanessa. For me. I rubbed my thumb along the edge of my glass and let the warmth of the fire soak into my legs, while Vanessa stared at her phone like it was a crystal ball predicting her future with a man she barely knew. The room had settled into that familiar holiday stillness, soft lights, scattered wrapping paper, a half-finished puzzle on the coffee table, but Vanessa was too busy rehearsing her imaginary romance to notice any of it. She kept glancing up at me every few seconds, trying to read my face like I was hiding a secret she hadn't decided on yet. She sensed something was off, but she had no idea where to aim her paranoia. Mom walked in with a bowl of mixed nuts and set it on the table. Vanessa didn't even pretend to help. She was too focused on her own reflection in the black screen of the TV. "So," she said finally, tucking her hair behind her ear in that dramatic way she uses when she wants attention. "You said you have work tomorrow?" "Something like that," I replied. She narrowed her eyes. "On Christmas Eve? Cyber threats don't check calendars." She scoffed. "Right. Forgot you're the Navy's personal superhero. I didn't bother correcting her. Explaining cyber operations to Vanessa was like explaining tax code to a toddler who had already decided they didn't care. Dad stepped in, holding a beer. "Let the girl work," he said. "Somebody's got to keep the country together." Vanessa rolled her eyes so hard I thought she might sprain something. "Dad, please." She sits at a computer. "Oh, day," he shrugged. "Better than sitting in traffic like me." Mom snorted quietly. Vanessa missed it. I stretched out my legs and listened to the wind outside rattle the window. The house felt smaller with Vanessa's ego filling the room. She crossed her arms and leaned back, suddenly restless. "Just saying," she continued. "Some of us have plans tomorrow, real plans." Mom perked up. "Oh? What kind of plans?" Vanessa's smile bloomed, like she'd been waiting hours for that question. "My boss personally asked me to be at the Christmas gala. It's going to be huge. All the senior leadership will be there." "That's great," Mom said, proud. Vanessa nodded, pleased with herself. "He values my presence. Says I bring something important to the team." Dad raised an eyebrow. "Did he say that directly?" "Well," she hesitated, then recovered. "Not in those exact words, but the message was clear." I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. Graham valued a lot of people on his team. He also valued reliable cybersecurity, but that didn't mean he was in love with my firewall. Vanessa looked at me again, scanning my reaction like she was collecting data. "You wouldn't get it," she said. "When someone successful sees potential in you, it feels different." I nodded. Sure. She wasn't satisfied. Her jealousy didn't like subtle agreements. It liked declarations, drama, visible insecurity, things I refused to give her. "So," she said, tapping her nails against her wine glass, "who are you meeting tomorrow? Another one of your, what do you call them, incidents?" "Something like that," I said again. She let out a breathy laugh. "Must be fun talking to people who actually understand what you do." "Sometimes," I answered. The vague answers were driving her insane, which, if I'm being honest, was a bonus. The truth was simple. Vanessa's mind was a maze of assumptions, and tonight, every hallway in that maze ended in the same direction: her boss. She was convinced he admired her. She was convinced the gala was some kind of invitation into his world. She was convinced she stood out among hundreds of employees. And she was convinced she deserved him more than anyone else. She turned back to her phone and typed something with purpose. Probably a message crafted to look casual, but edited 7 times. Mom leaned toward me. "Do you want more dessert?" "No, I'm good," I said. Vanessa interrupted. "Oh, actually, Mom, I'll take another piece of pie." Mom brought it to her without comment. Vanessa took the plate, gave a silent nod of approval, then immediately resumed her phone obsession. She was vibrating with excitement, every gesture exaggerated, every breath calculated. The irony was almost painful. She whispered to herself, "Tomorrow's the day." Dad shot me a look, like he was silently asking whether she'd lost her mind. I almost laughed. I shifted again, adjusting the pillow behind me, and thought about the email waiting in my inbox, a confirmation of the exact time I'd be meeting Graham before the gala, not as his employee, not as someone begging for attention, but as a consultant he trusted. Vanessa took a dramatic bite of pie. "I swear," she said, mouth half full, "if he compliments my presentation again, I'll take it as a sign." I cleared my throat. "Sounds promising." She grinned. "Exactly. He notices me." The room went quiet again, except for the sound of the fireplace crackling. Vanessa continued scrolling, completely oblivious to the reality humming under her nose. She had spent weeks daydreaming about a man who held half-hour strategy meetings with me and asked for my advice on risk mitigation. She had spent months bragging about someone who thanked me for helping him secure his company's infrastructure. She had spent years calling me lonely, unlucky, and too busy for anyone, while imagining herself as the center of someone else's universe. And somehow, she still believed she understood more about him than I did. She set her empty plate on the coffee table with a gentle clink and sighed dramatically, the kind of sigh reserved for people who think their love lives could be a Netflix special. "Tomorrow," she said softly, almost reverently, "everything changes." I nodded once, steady, casual. The kind of nod that didn't reveal a thing. The house creaked in the wind, and the fire continued its slow burn while Vanessa stared at her phone like she was waiting for a miracle. She didn't know that jealousy only burns hotter when truth walks in the room. I stood up from the couch to stretch my legs, pretending I needed a refill on water. Really, I just needed space from Vanessa's running commentary about destiny, chemistry, and whatever romantic fantasy she had built around her boss that week. The kitchen felt cooler, quieter, and easier to breathe in. I leaned against the counter for a moment, letting the hum of the refrigerator settle my nerves. My phone buzzed again. The screen lit up with a new message from Graham. Looking forward to tomorrow. Arriving at the venue early. Let me know if you need anything beforehand. I stared at the text for a second, the hint of a smile pulling at my mouth. Not because it was romantic, he wasn't the type to flirt over messages, but because it was direct, steady, and thoughtful. He treated me like someone who mattered. Someone whose presence wasn't an afterthought. I slid the phone into my pocket and walked back toward the living room. Vanessa immediately perked up, eyes narrowing like a hawk spotting movement. "Who keeps texting you tonight?" she asked, leaning forward like she had paid for front row seats. "Work," I said simply. She tilted her head. "Must be so thrilling to fix computer crises on Christmas week. It has its moments." Vanessa pushed her blanket aside, suddenly energized. "Well, my plans tomorrow don't involve sitting in front of a screen. I'll be at the Wilder Capital Christmas Gala. It's basically the event of the season. Black tie, open bar, high-level networking, the whole thing." She paused for dramatic effect. "And my boss specifically asked me to attend." "That's great," I said. "It is," she agreed, basking in imaginary spotlights. "He never forgets to include me. He really sees my value." Dad let out a quiet cough that suspiciously sounded like skepticism. Vanessa ignored him. She adjusted the throw pillow behind her and continued, "Honestly, Mom, you should have seen how he looked at me this week. Like he knew I'm going places." Mom nodded politely. "I'm sure you're doing a wonderful job." Vanessa flashed her best pageant smile. "I am." Her confidence was so loud it practically had subtitles. She turned her attention back to me. "You know, you could come with me." "Well," she scoffed, "not with me. As my plus one. But I doubt they'd let you in with those navy boots." "They're just boots," I said. "Exactly," she replied. I didn't bother pointing out that the boots in question were in the trunk of my car and had saved me from more dangerous situations than she could imagine. Vanessa stretched her arms behind her head. "Anyway, the gala is going to be incredible. All the senior executives will be there, including him." She said him, the way people say, the chosen one. I kept quiet, letting her enjoy her fantasy. She didn't need to know that not only would I be at the gala, but Graham had already arranged the security desk to expect me. My name wasn't on the employee list because I wasn't going as an employee. I was arriving through the VIP entrance reserved for partners, sponsors, and apparently Navy consultants who kept multi-million-dollar companies from imploding. She drummed her fingers on the table. "I already picked out my dress. Midnight blue, satin, floor-length, fits like a dream. He won't be able to look away." I had no doubt the dress was stunning. Vanessa never bought anything that didn't advertise her confidence. She glanced at me again. "What are you doing tomorrow night?" "Work. It's a video." Right, she said, waving a hand. "Important secret Navy business, very classified." "Not classified," I corrected. "Just scheduled." "Same thing." She wasn't listening. She was already imagining slow-motion scenes of herself descending the gala staircase, while her boss gasped in admiration. I let her keep the daydream. I wasn't in the business of ruining fantasies, even when they were built on quicksand. Mom gathered a stack of wrapping paper from the floor. "Aubrey, do you need anything for tomorrow? Lunch? Snacks? Thermos? You always forget to eat when you're busy." I smiled. "I'll be fine, Mom." Vanessa lifted her chin. "Well, I need to get some rest. Big day tomorrow. First impressions matter." Dad raised an eyebrow. "Hasn't he already met you?" Vanessa blinked, caught off guard. "Well, yes, but this is different." I didn't look up from my water glass. "How so?" She straightened her posture. "It's a holiday party. It's festive. It's Atmospheric. So the lighting will help? I asked, voice even. She glared at me. Lighting helps everyone. I nodded, like that was a profound revelation. She stood, smoothing her pajama shorts dramatically. If you'll excuse me, I need to steam my dress. Good luck, Dad said. Thanks, she replied, assuming he meant it earnestly. She disappeared down the hallway toward her bedroom. The door closed a bit too loudly. Mom sighed, shaking her head. She gets so wound up about these events. That's one way to put it, Dad muttered. I picked up my water and leaned back into the couch. The house quieted again, settling into its familiar rhythm. The fire crackled softly. The wind rattled the windows. Mom hummed, while cleaning up stray ribbons from the floor. My phone buzzed once more, a simple reminder from Graham. See you tomorrow. I tapped the screen off before either of my parents could see the glow. Not because I was hiding anything, but because the moment didn't need extra noise. Vanessa wanted the gala to be her big night. She had no idea how different the night would actually turn out. I woke up earlier than I needed to, mostly because sleeping in my childhood bedroom always felt like sleeping inside a time capsule. Same wallpaper, same creaky dresser, same ceiling fan that wobbled like a drunk sailor. I got dressed quietly, keeping everything simple: black dress, low heels, hair pulled back, nothing dramatic, nothing that screamed for attention. I wasn't going to the gala to be seen. I was going because Graham had asked, plainly and professionally. Vanessa, on the other hand, treated the morning like it was the pre-game show to a championship. She blasted music from her room, blow-dried her hair loud enough to disrupt local wildlife, and marched around the hallway like she was preparing for a royal procession. At one point, she knocked on my door without waiting. Aubrey, do you own a steamer? No, I said. She huffed. Of course not. She disappeared again, leaving a faint cloud of hairspray behind her. Around noon, she came downstairs in a silk robe, hair in large rollers, holding her dress up like it was a sacred artifact. Mom gasped the way moms do when shiny things enter their visual field. Oh honey, that's beautiful. Vanessa spun slowly. I know. Dad looked up from his crossword. Looks expensive. Again. It was an investment, she said, dropping the word like she'd attended a seminar on tax deductions. I grabbed a cup of coffee and sat at the table, while Vanessa continued orbiting her imaginary spotlight. She snapped photos of herself in the robe, the dress, half the kitchen, then finally announced she needed quiet time to mentally prepare. I took my coffee outside. The cold air felt good, clean, simpler than whatever theatrical production Vanessa rehearsed inside. I checked my phone. One new message. Entrance arranged. You'll be checked in at the side lobby, instead of the main line. Practical, efficient, very Graham. I sent a short acknowledgement and tucked the phone away. By late afternoon, the house transformed into a backstage area. Mom ironed napkins, just in case we need them later. Dad tried to salvage the living room from Vanessa's tornado of makeup and hair tools, and Vanessa herself emerged dressed, glowing, and unbearably smug. How do I look? She asked. Mom beamed. Stunning. Dad nodded. You look like you're going to a movie premiere. That's the idea, Vanessa said, smoothing the fabric over her hip. She turned to me like she was expecting me to lower myself into a compliment. What about you? Don't you have work? Are you going in that? Yes, I said, sipping my water. She gave me a slow, pitying blink. Well, good luck with your cyber duties. I grabbed my coat. Thanks. We ended up leaving at the same time, though we took separate cars. She was convinced arriving too early made her look desperate. I arrived early because punctuality isn't optional when your entire job revolves around structure. The venue was a downtown hotel, dressed in lights and oversized ornaments. Elegant, but not pretentious. I showed my ID at the side lobby, and as promised, security waved me in. No line, no fuss. No crowd of employees stretching around the hallway. Inside, warm lights bounced off glass walls and polished floors. Soft jazz played in the background. People mingled with champagne flutes, most of them in suits that cost more than my entire car. I wasn't out of place, but I definitely wasn't part of their world either. I spotted Graham near the front of the room, talking with the CFO. He wore a charcoal suit, no tie, the same calm presence he always had. He noticed me almost instantly. Not because I stood out, but because he was actually looking. He excused himself from the conversation and walked toward me. Confident steps, no hesitation. "Lieutenant Cole," he said, his voice warm. "Glad you could make it." "Thanks for the invitation," I replied. "I wanted you here," he said plainly. "You've done a lot for us this year." Nothing romantic, just respect. We talked briefly, work, logistics, the next audit. It felt normal, grounded, easy. Then the main entrance doors opened, and the room shifted almost imperceptibly. Vanessa stepped inside, like she expected applause. Midnight blue dress, high slit, heels that would break most people's ankles. She scanned the room with a smile so bright it belonged in a toothpaste commercial. She spotted Graham first, then realized he wasn't alone. Her smile faltered. She began walking toward us, each step smaller than the last. Her eyes bounced between us, confusion first, then suspicion, then something darker creeping in at the edges. Graham didn't notice her right away. He was telling me about the board meeting scheduled for January, when she finally closed the distance. "Graham," she said, voice high and breathy. He turned, polite. "Vanessa, good to see you." She shifted her weight, waiting for more. Some compliment, some spark, some hint that he'd been holding his breath for her arrival. It didn't come. Instead, he glanced at me. "Did you meet Lieutenant Cole? She's been instrumental in our security transitions this year." Vanessa froze. Literally froze. Her face tightened like she'd swallowed drywall dust. "Lieutenant Cole?" she repeated. "Yes," he said casually. "She's exceptional." My sister blinked at me, her voice shrill. You're working with him?" Graham smiled, oblivious to the emotional explosion happening 6 inches from us. "She's been invaluable." Vanessa's chest rose and fell too quickly. She stared at me like she was trying to figure out whether she was hallucinating. The CFO walked over. "Graham, they're ready for the toast." "Of course," he said. Then he looked at me again. "Would you walk with me?" I nodded. Vanessa stood rooted to the spot, her entire fantasy collapsing in one brutal, silent moment. No theatrics, no shouting. Just the quiet realization that everything she had assumed, every dream, every story, every imagined connection was wrong. And the man she'd been chasing had looked right past her, and directly at me. Graham and I moved through the crowd together, and I could feel eyes drifting our way not because I stood out, but because he did. People naturally parted for him, respectful, curious, waiting for a chance to shake his hand or pitch an idea. He didn't rush. He didn't perform. He simply walked with a steady calm that made everything around him feel intentional. I kept pace beside him, hands relaxed at my sides, trying not to look like the only person in the room who had shown up without some corporate agenda. He slowed as we reached the center of the ballroom, where the tall glass bar stood glowing under soft lights. A few executives waved him over, but he raised a hand to signal he'd be there soon. "Can I get you something?" he asked. "Water's fine," I said. He nodded to the bartender, and in seconds, a cold glass appeared in front of me. He didn't order alcohol for himself either, which somehow made the moment feel less like a social event and more like two people standing exactly where they were supposed to be. "I appreciate you coming tonight," he said, turning slightly toward me. "This year would have looked very different without your help." I accepted the water, happy to support. "It's more than support," he replied. "You rebuilt half our response protocols. You've trained my team. You've saved us from at least 3 major incidents." I shrugged. "That's the job." He smiled. "You undersell yourself." Before I could answer, the lights dimmed a little. A signal. A soft chime played through the speakers. Guests drifted toward the raised platform near the front, the stage where Wilder Capital made its end-of-year address. Graham touched my elbow lightly, just enough to guide. "Come on," he said. "They'll want you closer." I followed him, ignoring the knot of employees whispering behind us. Vanessa was somewhere in that cluster-stiff posture, clenched jaws, eyes tracking every move like a hawk losing its territory. We reached the front row. He stood next to me. Executives lined up behind us, the board members settling into their seats. The CFO tapped the microphone, and conversations dissolved instantly. "Thank you all for being here tonight," the CFO began, smiling broadly. It's been an extraordinary year, and none of it would have been possible without the dedication in this room. The usual applause followed. Graham listened with polite attention, hands clasped loosely in front of him. Then the CFO continued. Before our CEO gives his annual address, I want to highlight a contribution we've been wanting to acknowledge for months. I glanced at Graham. He didn't move, didn't react, didn't give anything away. The CFO smiled directly at him. Graham, you've been at the center of every challenge we faced this year, but you weren't alone. You had help from someone outside our walls, someone who stepped in when we needed them most. A soft murmur rolled through the room. I felt a slow warmth spread across my chest. The CFO extended his hand toward me. Aubrey Cole, United States Navy. My name echoed in the speakers. The applause hit like a wave, genuine, full, unhesitating. Lights shifted slightly toward where I stood. People turned completely around to look. I felt my breath catch for half a second. Recognition wasn't something I ever expected from a corporate gala. Graham stepped forward, taking the microphone. Lieutenant Cole, he said, voice steady, carrying easily across the room, helped us when we didn't have the internal tools to help ourselves. She took our vulnerabilities seriously. She told us the truth when others sugarcoated it. She showed up, consistently, without asking for anything in return. The room held its breath. He continued, she is the reason this company avoided several costly breaches. And she is the reason our cybersecurity infrastructure finally meets the standard I've been pushing for since the day I stepped into this job. More applause, warmer this time. But Graham wasn't finished. He turned toward me fully, lowering the microphone a little. And beyond her work, she has shown integrity, discipline, patience, and a kind of quiet strength I don't see often. The crowd wasn't just listening, they were absorbing every word. I kept my posture calm, hands clasped lightly in front of me, but my pulse ticked under my skin. He lifted the microphone again. I don't always talk about the people I admire, but I'm speaking about one right now. The applause wasn't thunderous, it was slow, respectful, deliberate, the kind that sank deep rather than echoed. And then, he handed the microphone back to the CFO and looked only at me, not at the executives, not at the audience, not at Vanessa, who stood frozen halfway across the room, her smile cracked like dropped porcelain. He looked at me. Aubrey, he said quietly, not for the crowd but for me alone. I'm glad you're here tonight. No theatrics. No spotlight. Just truth. The CFO resumed his speech, the room easing back into its polished rhythm, but the energy had shifted, subtle, warm, unmistakable. People resumed their conversations with a different kind of energy, curious glances, respectful nods, and hushed exchanges about the Navy officer standing beside their CEO. I stayed composed, hands relaxed, expression steady, but inside, something warm flickered. Not pride, not shock. Just a quiet acknowledgement that someone had finally seen the work for what it was. Graham leaned slightly toward me. Would you like some air? He asked. I nodded. The ballroom felt too warm, too crowded, too filled with eyes that didn't know where to look. He guided us toward a side hallway where the noise softened behind thick doors. The exit led to a small terrace overlooking the city. Snow was falling lightly, thin flakes drifting down like they'd been waiting for the right moment to show up. The cold air bit my cheeks in a way that felt grounding. He stepped beside me, hands in his pockets, watching the snow for a moment before speaking. You handled that well, he said. It was unexpected, I admitted. He nodded slowly. You deserved it. We stood there quietly, the city lights glowing under the snowfall, the muffled hum of the gala barely reaching us. I breathed in the crisp air, letting the chaos behind us settle into the background. He glanced over, the faintest smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. You know, I didn't ask you here just because of your contributions. My chest tightened for a second, not fear, just alert focus. No, he said softly. I asked because I wanted you here. There was nothing ambiguous in his tone. No theatrics, no hesitation. He spoke like a man who weighed every word before he let it leave his mouth. I held his gaze. Why? He exhaled, slow and steady. Because you're someone I respect, someone who listens, someone with actual conviction. In my world, people talk endlessly, and say very little. You're different. The cold air between us didn't feel cold anymore. He looked down at his hands, like he was searching for the right sentence. After my wife passed, I didn't think I'd connect with anyone again, not in any meaningful way. And I'm not saying this lightly. I don't think I've looked forward to talking to someone the way I look forward to talking to you. My heart thudded in a slow, controlled beat. Graham. He raised a hand, not to stop me, but to steady himself. Let me say this the right way. Snow gathered lightly on the railing beside us, melting under his fingertips as he rested his hand on the cold metal. I don't fall for people easily, he said, but I trust my instincts, and they've been telling me something for months. He reached into the inner pocket of his coat, not dramatic, not slow motion, just a natural movement, and pulled out a small velvet box, dark blue, simple, elegant. He held it in his palm, not opening it yet, not rushing. I'm not asking for a decision tonight, and I'm not asking for an answer you're not ready to give. What I'm asking right now is whether there's a world where you could see a future with me. 252. My breath stilled. The snow drifted quietly around us. His voice stayed calm, steady, no desperation, no performance. He opened the box. Inside was a ring not flashy, not oversized. A thin band of white gold with a single diamond, understated and timeless. The kind of ring chosen by someone who valued meaning over spectacle. My fingers warmed against my palm. He continued in a softer voice. This isn't about grand gestures or trying to impress anyone. It's about intention. It's about wanting to build something real with someone who understands what that means. I swallowed, the cold brushing against my throat. Why me? He didn't hesitate. Because you're the first person I've met in years who has nothing to prove and everything to give. The snow thickened just a little, settling onto his shoulders, his hair, the edges of his coat. The city lights reflected off it like tiny sparks. He stepped closer, not invading my space, just closing the distance with quiet certainty. I'm not asking for yes, he said again. Just tell me you see what I see. For a moment, I said nothing. Not because I was unsure, but because talking felt too small for the weight of the moment. I took a slow breath, watching the air cloud in front of me. Then I lifted my eyes to his. I see it. End quote. His shoulders relaxed, a breath leaving him he'd probably been holding for weeks. He didn't slip the ring onto my finger. He didn't push the moment into a fairy tale. He simply closed the box gently, tucked it back inside his coat, and gave a nod like he trusted me more than anyone else in the world. Snow drifted in soft curtains around us, and he reached for my hand, not pulling, not claiming, just taking it with quiet familiarity. The door behind us opened suddenly, and warm music spilled onto the terrace. Vanessa stepped out, breath sharp in the cold, eyes wide as saucers. Her gaze dropped to our joined hands, then snapped to his coat where she'd clearly seen the box disappear moments earlier. Her mouth fell open. Nothing came out. Not a word. Not a sound. Not even a breath. She stood frozen in the doorway, her entire world collapsing in total silence, while snow collected quietly on her perfect curls. I didn't say anything. Graham didn't either. He let go of my hand gently, not out of embarrassment or secrecy, but because he wasn't interested in turning the moment into a spectacle. He gave me a small nod, steady, reassuring, and stepped back toward the ballroom to rejoin the executives. I stayed on the terrace a moment longer, the cold helping anchor everything inside me. Vanessa hovered in the doorway like she'd stumbled into the wrong movie and didn't know how to leave the theater. She finally found her voice, brittle and sharp. What was that? I brushed snow from my sleeve. A conversation. What kind of conversation involves a ring box? She hissed. A private one. Her eyes flashed. So you and my boss are... I gave a small shrug. Talking. She stared at me like the word personally offended her. She opened her mouth to continue, but I stepped past her, without waiting for whatever accusation she hadn't finished forming. She trailed behind me into the ballroom, shaken and unsteady, like someone walking through uneven ground in heels. People approached Graham as soon as he re-entered, clapping him on the back, offering congratulations, praising the speech. Vanessa looked from face to face in disbelief. It was the first time she had seen him admired by others while giving the credit to someone else. Someone who wasn't her. I stayed off to the side, letting the room move without me. Eventually, the night wound down, the crowd thinned, and people drifted toward the exits in pairs and small groups. Graham approached me once more, his voice soft enough that only I could hear. "I'll call you tomorrow," he said. "I'll be home," I replied. He brushed a touch of snow from the shoulder of my coat, subtle but intentional, then stepped away. Vanessa watched the entire exchange like she had accidentally witnessed an eclipse. She didn't speak again until we were both outside in the parking lot, her heels clicking hard against the pavement. "What happened to cyber duties?" she snapped. "Still have them," I said. "So he just what invited you? You're not even in his company." "No," I said calmly. "I'm not." We stood under a streetlight, snow drifting lightly around us. Her breath came out fast and uneven. She looked at me, then at the hotel, then at the street as if searching for an explanation that didn't exist. "You embarrassed me," she said suddenly. I blinked. "How?" "You made me look stupid," she said. "In there. In front of everyone." I didn't raise my voice. "You assumed something that wasn't true. That's not on me." She wrapped her arms around herself, the dress offering no warmth. "He was supposed to notice me." "He did," I said plainly. "Just not the way you thought." She flinched like I'd slapped her. The drive home was cold and silent, snow building in soft mounds along the roadside. When we reached the house, she stormed inside while I quietly hung my coat. Mom peeked around the corner, eyes bright with curiosity. "You two okay?" she asked. "We're fine," I said. Vanessa slammed her bedroom door. Mom's eyebrows rose. She didn't seem fine. Dad emerged from the living room with a glass of water. "Something happened at the party?" "A lot happened," I said. He nodded slowly, sensing the boundary. "You hungry?" "Not really." He didn't press further. I went upstairs, changed out of my dress, and washed the cold from my hands. My phone buzzed once, a simple message from Graham. "Home safe?" "Yes," I replied. "Thank you." "Sleep well." "You too." Nothing dramatic, just comfortable. I crawled into bed, the old mattress squeaking beneath me. Outside, snow kept falling, steady and patient, blanketing the neighborhood in a clean, quiet calm. When morning came, the house smelled like coffee and pancakes. Mom was humming in the kitchen. Dad read the paper. I poured myself a cup and joined them. The warmth of the mug seeped into my palms. Vanessa entered last. Her hair was still perfectly styled from the night before sleep clearly hadn't touched her. She sat down at the table without a word, eyes fixed on her plate, fork motionless in her hand. Mom brightened. "How was the gala, sweetheart?" Vanessa's jaw clenched. Dad lowered his paper. "Did something go wrong?" She didn't blink. "Aubrey stole my night." I nearly laughed. Mom frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," Vanessa said, stabbing at her pancake, "that while I was doing everything I could to get noticed, she pointed sharply in my direction, was already on the inside." Mom turned to me. "Honey?" I took a sip of coffee. "I consulted for his company this year." Dad nodded, impressed. "Ah, that explains the messages." Mom softened. "Why didn't you tell us?" "You didn't ask," I said. Vanessa made a strange strangled noise, somewhere between disbelief and outrage. "This is not funny." "I'm not laughing." She slapped her fork down. "He brought you to the front. He talked about you for 10 minutes. He looked at you like—" She couldn't finish. Dad tilted his head. "Looked at her like what?" Vanessa squeezed her eyes shut. "Like she mattered." The room went still. Mom set her coffee down gently. "Sweetheart, that's not Aubrey's fault." Vanessa shook her head. "She always shows up out of nowhere and takes everything, every time." I met her eyes calmly. "This wasn't about you." "That's the problem," she yelled. Dad leaned forward. "Vanessa, I say this with love. Everything is not a competition." "It is for her," she snapped. I stayed seated, steady, grounded. "He didn't choose me instead of you. He chose me for reasons that have nothing to do with you." She stared at me, stunned by the simplicity of it. For the first time in years, she had no comeback. Behind us, the snow outside continued its slow descent, quiet, patient, indifferent to the chaos inside the kitchen. And for once, I didn't feel the need to fill the silence. I finished my coffee slowly, letting the warmth settle in my chest while Vanessa sat across from me, finally quiet in a way I hadn't seen since we were kids. The tension in the room didn't feel hostile anymore. It felt like something had shifted, something she couldn't shove back into place with attitude or volume. She kept her eyes on her plate, her shoulders pulled in just a little, not defeated but no longer inflated by all the stories she had built. And for the first time, I didn't feel obligated to explain myself. Graham didn't walk into my life because I outshined her. He saw me because I showed up in ways that had nothing to do with attention, quiet work, steady choices, and a kind of resilience Vanessa never bothered to understand. The Navy taught me a lot, but the biggest lesson came long before deployments and codes and security briefings. You can't control who recognizes your value, but you can control who you are. When Vanessa finally looked up, her voice was softer. I just thought I'd be the one. I know, I said, and I meant it. Not as an apology, just acknowledgement. Mom reached over and touched her hand. Dad folded his newspaper. The house felt warmer than it had the night before, like something had finally healed. I stood, rinsed my mug, and let the quiet settle in behind me. Not triumph, not revenge, just clarity. Life doesn't always hand you the moment you think you deserve, sometimes it hands you the one you've earned. And this was mine. If you connected with this story and you enjoy real-life military stories, family drama, and deep-cut revenge stories where the truth slowly finds its way to the surface, make sure you subscribe and drop a comment below. I'd love to hear where you're watching from and what part of this journey hit home for you. Use arrow up and arrow down to select a turn, enter to jump to it, and escape to return to the chat.